So what worries me the most is our lack of surge capacity. And, we see those worst case scenarios, unfortunately, on not irregular basis in Canada.
It's Wednesday, the 21st day of January, 2026. Welcome back to the program. Closer Look. That's us. Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief, Derek Turner, executive producer. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Are you a fan of soccer?
I do love the World Cup. I love internationals. I do. I don't watch. I don't understand all the leagues. There's like the Premier League and the Champions League. I like Ted Lasso's a good show. But
agreed.
Yeah, but when the World Cup, it's very easy to understand. Soccer is the beautiful game. Those people are so talented. The way they can.
No question.
Yeah, and I do. I cheer for Italy. The heritage comes out. I cheer for the Italian team, but they haven't been in the World Cup in a last few tries, and they're still fighting to get in this year's World Cup.
Here's what I don't understand about soccer, and we're going to get to the point of why we're talking about soccer in a sec. When they add extra time, I don't get where that comes from.
Well, I think if I understand correctly, it's because the time the guys all flop and lie on the ground, it's injury time, right? It's like the ref is calculating in their head how much time was wasted during those stoppages in play, and then they add it to the end.
But that must be the only sport where that happens.
It is.
That doesn't happen
bizarre.
In hockey or football.
It's kind of bizarre.
All right. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is going to be hosted in Vancouver and Toronto coming up in June.
And the United States and Mexico.
Right, yeah.
Which is that's a whole other show. Well, we've talked about that on the show, but that's
the irony.
I don't know what's going to – by the time the World Cup rolls around, where are we going to be with our relations with the United States? I mean, how are they even allow each other to come to –
I don't know. So there's 13 games, 13 matches going to be played in Canada.
In Canada, yes.
Vancouver and Toronto. And the potential strain on the healthcare system in those markets.
Yeah, forget the strain on the politics.
Yeah, that's a whole other
talk about
podcast,
strain on the healthcare system. Yeah. Dr. Catherine Varner, she's an emergency physician in Toronto and the deputy editor of the Canadian Medical Association Journal, wrote a really powerful editorial in their latest edition about how these kind of mass gathering events where hundreds of thousands of people come to the cities to visit for the World Cup or things like that can be a real strain on the healthcare system, which is already at its peak burden.
Yeah.
They're right at the tip of being strained already. And her editorial is very powerful because it talks about, what we have to be careful for during events like this, but just that we also need to have a bigger conversation, remind people that we're at that tipping point at all times, right? And that, any mass casualty event or mass injury event at something like this can really kind of topple it over like Jenga. Yeah. And her editorials, it's excellent. It's a great read. It's you don't have to be a doctor to understand what she's saying. No. It's written for everybody.
Thankfully.
And Dr. Varner, who's extremely busy and extremely passionate about what she does for a living, has agreed to take a few minutes to chat with us about the editorial and about the bigger issues at play here. I think it's going to be a great conversation.
When people hear World Cup of Soccer, they think of parties, packed patios, and booming economies in the host cities. What you don't often hear about are hospitals, but it's a very important question. What kind of impact do big gatherings like this have on emergency departments, especially if there's a sudden unexpected surge in patients showing up at the ER? Here to help us understand the implications and what we need to do to prepare is Dr. Catherine Varner, an emergency physician in Toronto and deputy editor of the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Doctor, welcome to the show. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, Doctor, you just published the editorial in the Canadian Medical Association Journal under the headline, Mass Gathering Events Underscore Serious Vulnerabilities in Healthcare Capacity. Now, we already know how stretched the Canadian healthcare system is, especially our emergency rooms. What happens when you add hundreds of thousands of visitors to that equation?
Yeah, so there's a whole body of evidence that explores that. And what we see is emergency department utilization goes up, particularly around sporting events, in part because people are celebrating, they're using more alcohol than they would typically, and or substances. And there's an increase in trauma, and there's also an increase in alcohol and substance-related events and emergency departments.
Did you see that during the World Series too, Doctor?
Yeah, I worked in downtown Toronto in Game 1 and 7 of the World Series, and that was really consistent with my experience on the ground. And what struck me those nights that's the type of volume that we are accustomed to around events. We have a lot of mass gathering events in Toronto, And that's typical for what we see. And World Series, I would say, was probably more than that, just because there was a large number of people, not just in the stadiums, but also celebrating in the city. However, the concern that I had, and really what made me want to write this editorial, was thinking about what would happen if we had a surge in need of healthcare resources, or what we call like an external disaster in our planning and policies in the hospital. And the second stage of that planning in responding to that type of event is what's called decanting your emergency department. So you make space, and you make space in the hospital. And when our hospitals are running at 100% capacity, as they were around that time, and that wasn't flu season, I'm not sure where we would make space for that type of event.
Doctor, what worries you the most? In other words, what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, so what worries me the most is our lack of surge capacity. And we see those worst case scenarios, unfortunately, on not irregular basis in Canada, where like an influenza season, we've had a particularly bad influenza season, and horrible things have happened, and waiting rooms, which I'm sure everyone has heard about through the course of this influenza season, where people were unable to be seen by a physician in a timely manner, and had bad outcomes in the waiting room.
It's fascinating, this editorial, especially at the end, Doctor, because you're talking about the World Cup, you're talking about the World Series, but this is like, from what I learned in your editorial, this is just a daily occurrence. Like, you would be worried about this every day. Like, we're always at the brink or over the brink right now. We're just not ready at all for any kind of mass surge in demand.
So how we're prepared on paper, I think, is very different than how we are prepared, in reality. And we do have world experts in both Toronto and Vancouver, the host cities, who are preparing our cities for, these types of events, and have had a lot of experience in the planning for these types of events. I think the challenge is executing these types of plans in a healthcare system where sort of runs at 100% capacity all the time. We run a very lean system. So imagining if you needed to surge quickly, not being able to have that space and capacity is the main concern.
I just want to read this one paragraph, Doctor. Canada is increasingly vulnerable to events that may result in a surge in healthcare utilization, including climate emergencies, mass gathering events, infectious disease outbreaks, and global defense escalations. A coherent, feasible, actionable, and national plan is urgently needed to increase hospital beds and train the required personnel such that quality care can be maintained. Are people listening? Who's listening to this, or who's not listening?
That was also another reason why I wrote this editorial. I would think that people would listen and pay attention to the types of events that have happened in our waiting rooms. It seems like when there's the possibility of beds actually being cut in Canada in 2026, it sounds like no one's listening. And so maybe the international specter of a World Cup event would make people listen. And that was one of the reasons, in part, to look at this national problem from a slightly different angle.
Doctor, when a system is already at capacity, what's usually the first thing to crack? Is it wait times? Is it staffing? Is it patient safety? What is it?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, they all are affect one another, certainly. And I think the one that worries me the most, and I think causes the most moral distress for providers, is when you can't provide that high quality care that you feel that a patient is deserving of. And all of our patients are deserving of that high quality care. So when you're faced with treating a patient in a waiting room, when in fact they need, a care space where there's access to one-to-one nursing, or needing IV antibiotics or timely administration of antibiotics, needing oxygen, those types of things, and you can't provide those, that's when you really feel the moral distress. So that affects burnout in our setting, certainly, and it makes it hard to retain and attract people to work in these emergency department environments when they are constantly feeling that pressure of being over capacity.
For sure. It leads into my next question. You talk about this in the editorial as well. People would just assume, well, let's just get more staff on board during a big event like the World Cup. That's just not possible, is it, Doctor?
No, and that's what the scientific literature suggests we should be doing around these mass gathering types of events, is a protective measure to ensure that we can provide high quality care. However, in our current healthcare environment, where hospitals in Ontario at least are facing huge budget deficits and saying through the Ontario Hospital Association that they're going to have to cut personnel and cut hospital beds, I can't imagine a scenario where they're going to be increasing hospital staffing for the World Cup when they're not increasing hospital staffing for influenza season. So, we're really faced with a difficult challenge outside of the World Cup really all year long.
So let's talk about that for a sec. How do we solve the staffing crisis? It seems impossible.
Oh, it's many years in the making, and I think it's going to be many years in the fixing. But a concerted effort to focus on it in a multidimensional way, I think, is critical. And often what happens is people work around the edges of it. So moving some elective surgeries into more ambulatory surgical spaces, for instance, those are great initiatives, but it really doesn't cut to the core of not having enough hospital beds per capita in Canada. And we've been looking across at peer countries. Canada just does not have nearly as many hospital beds per capita as other countries in the OECD, for instance.
I think what frustrates a lot of people, whether it be just regular folks like us or politicians, is we often hear the defense of public health care, why we love public health care, why it's so important to this country. It's one of the things that makes us Canadian. But the way when you read an editorial like this, or you just read about anything that with the hospital system right now or the healthcare system, it doesn't feel like we're behaving like we love public health care, that we believe in public health care. Is that fair to say, Doctor?
Yeah, and I'm loath to criticize our healthcare system, in part because I think we provide really high quality care to patients. We just don't have enough of it.
Yes.
So the backbone of our healthcare system, I truly believe, is a core bet. Like, we have an incredible healthcare system that provides the best quality of care in the world. UHN, which I'm not affiliated with, was named the top 3 hospitals or 4 hospitals in the world a couple of weeks ago. I think we are so fortunate. It's just a matter of space and personnel and funding, and going forward with our aging population, with increasing morbidity, I really do think that it should be a national strategy, not just a strategy that's looked at when there's a provincial election. I mean, I think that's really an unsustainable way of managing a healthcare system.
And sadly, this last provincial election, it didn't even feel like it was on the topic of discussion. Yeah. It felt like it was barely brought up. Doctor, if you could speak today to someone who actually made big decisions on the healthcare front, what would be the one thing you would say to them?
I think taking a multi-pronged approach at the hospital capacity is a major vulnerability in our healthcare system. Looking at it, not just from who's coming into the door of the emergency department, but how can we also safely discharge patients from hospital into long-term care homes, such that we can open up capacity into our acute care system.
Just a couple more questions. Appreciate all your time, Doctor. In terms of preparation for this World Cup, what's actually going on for this specific thing? We haven't talked a lot about it, but what's actually being done to make sure we're as ready as possible?
Yeah, so it is not a part that I am directly involved in, but I am certainly aware of all of the planning that has taken place in such a multidimensional way, with, like, as I mentioned earlier, world experts in mass gatherings, not just from a health perspective, but also from a city planning perspective. But the health measures that are going into place have been planned for now many months. And so that is public health measures. So thinking about the wastewater surveillance programs that are taking place in both cities to watch for things like measles uptick, for instance, which actually occurred after the Vancouver Olympics. And then also the hospitals working together to do some simulation exercises in the management of one of these worst case scenarios. So all of the hospitals, paramedical systems, as well as fire, police, all working together to ensure that they have the best laid plans.
Dr. Varner, I'm curious for locals in both Toronto and Vancouver, how might this affect everyday care during the tournament in those two cities?
Yeah, so we're seeing an uptick in visitors certainly during that time, and it's already a time where we have uptick in visitors for our many cultural gatherings, including Pride, which coincides actually on one of the games of the World Cup. And so I would anticipate, certainly in the downtown core, where these events are taking place, probably an uptick as shown in the literature and utilization of emergency services. And my hope as a frontline provider is that I can continue to provide the high quality care that all of our patients deserve.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, thank you so much for your time. I want to ask you this. I ask this of all healthcare professionals we talk to. I can't imagine doing the job you do. We've all depended on the healthcare system. UHN actually took good care of me during some health issues I had a few years ago. You mentioned UHN. Who takes care of you? How do you guys keep going? Because it's a massive burden on what you do.
It is a team sport. We say that all the time in emergency medicine. I'm predominantly a night shift worker, and the way that we care for one another is really supporting each other on shift, especially when there are things that we are part of. Patients have difficult outcomes, and supporting each other, debriefing with one another, and being attentive to the emotional effect of this job. But I love the job that I do. I love providing frontline care. I am so inspired by the patients and how they manage their very difficult circumstances and how they take it with so much bravery that most often I walk away from a shift feeling totally inspired by how people are living despite facing pretty substantial health challenges.
That's wonderful to hear. Now I feel bad though, because now I know you work the night shift. We probably should have bothered you maybe at a different time of day for the conversation. Sorry, Doctor.
Doctor, before we let you go tonight, anything that we didn't cover that we should have?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about this, and I look forward to the summer of another great summer of a lot of fantastic events held in our city.
I hope someone gives you tickets to the World Cup, Doctor. That's
absolutely. That's the least.
I'm not sure if that's.
Well, we appreciate all you do, Doctor. So thanks for that, and thanks for this. From Toronto tonight, Dr. Catherine Varner.
Thanks so much.
I was so relieved to hear that Dr. Varner flipped shifts, and we weren't keeping her up from much deserved nap. But as always, a great conversation and a real eye opener.
Yeah, and I really encourage everyone to read Dr. Varner's editorial. It's online, it's available. It's in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. If you just Google, we'll put the link in our right up here for it as well. But basically, what she's saying is, and I don't want to use her, these aren't her words, these are my interpretation of what she's written. The healthcare system, the public healthcare system walks a tightrope every single day, every single shift, every hour, right? And if anything major happens, a mass casualty event or something, they're in big trouble. They're just because they're already at capacity or over capacity, right? Yeah. And I think if you're a patient in this country, if you have a loved one getting health care in this country in hospitals, or if you're a politician making decisions, I would suggest you take the 5 minutes it takes to read this editorial, because it was hugely eye-opening to me. Of course, the World Cup is what we call the news hook. That's what she started the story. Of course, yeah. But it's really has nothing to do with the World Cup. It has to do with the fact that we have this healthcare system that we need to pay more attention to.
Absolutely. All right, good stuff. Closer look at villagemedia.ca is our email address. We would love to hear from you. It's always open 24/7, so reach out and let us know what you think about the healthcare system around FIFA's World Cup or just in general. We'd love to hear your comments. That's it for us tonight. For Derek Turner, executive producer of the program, and Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for your time tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.